The sun was blazing, and kids were splashing in the pool, laughter filling the air. Then, out of nowhere, a woman stormed over. Her face was tight with anger as she locked eyes on one person. "Darius, you don't belong here!" she snapped, her voice cutting through the fun like a knife. Darius wiped the water from his face, confused. "What?" "I'm calling security," she threatened, pulling out her phone. "This pool isn't for people like you." Before she could press dial, a sharp, commanding voice stopped her cold. She turned, and the color drained from her face. "Before we continue, let us know. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below." Darius stared at the woman, water dripping from his hair. The pool had been his escape from the scorching heat, a place where he could just relax for a while. But now, he was being treated like a criminal for doing nothing at all. The woman, Karen, stood tall with her arms crossed, her phone gripped tightly. She wasn't just angry, she was entitled. The type of person who thought she had control over everything, the type who believed she decided who belonged and who didn't. "You think I don't know what's going on here?" Karen scoffed. "I've seen you before. You don't live here." Darius clenched his jaw. "Actually, I do." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Oh, really? Then prove it." A few people around the pool glanced over, some whispering, others pretending not to see what was happening. This wasn't new to Darius. He had seen this look before, the way certain people assumed things just by looking at him. But today, he wasn't going to let it slide. "Why should I prove anything to you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Karen let out a dry laugh. "Because I live here, and I know for a fact people like you don't belong in this community." Darius took a deep breath, steadying himself. If only she knew who his mother was. Darius locked eyes with Karen, refusing to back down. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, being treated like some trespasser at the community pool he had been coming to since he was a kid. Karen let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head. "You young people think you can just go anywhere you want, but this is a private pool. I know everyone who lives here." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah? Then tell me my name." Karen blinked, caught off guard for a split second. "I don't need to know your name to know you don't live here." A few heads turned. Some parents whispered to each other, but no one spoke up. They all just watched. Darius let out a slow breath. "You're making a mistake." Karen scoffed. "No, you made the mistake by thinking you could just walk in here like you belong." Darius folded his arms. "I do belong." Karen's jaw clenched. "Enough! I'm calling security." She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen with pure confidence, like she had done this 100 times before. "You're really calling security?" "Over what?" Darius asked, tilting his head. Karen smirked. "Over trespassing. And when security gets here, you'll have to answer some questions, young man." A woman sitting in a lounge chair spoke up. "Karen, maybe he does live here." Karen snapped her head around. "Excuse me?" The woman immediately looked down at her book, staying out of it. Darius shook his head. "Wow, so no one's gonna say anything." No one did. Karen turned back to him. "You should just leave now, before this gets embarrassing for you." Darius's patience snapped. "Lady, you are the one embarrassing yourself." Karen's face turned red. "How dare you talk to me like that?" Darius threw his hands up. "You're accusing me of breaking into a pool that I've been coming to since I was a kid. What do you expect me to do?" "Thank you." Karen's grip on her phone tightened. "Well, if you really live here, then where do you live?" Darius exhaled, now fully annoyed. "I live on Maplewood Drive." Karen narrowed her eyes. "Liar. There's only one black family on Maplewood and—" She stopped. Her face froze. Darius crossed his arms. "And what?" Karen swallowed hard. Wait, no, that can't be. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, rolling to a slow stop. Darius smiled. He said, "You're about to find out exactly who I am." The poolside was silent. Everyone had been watching the argument between Karen and Darius, but no one expected what happened next. The black SUV rolled to a stop and a tall, confident woman stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere. Karen's fingers trembled against her phone. Her confidence gone. Darius smirked. "You recognize her, don't you?" Karen swallowed hard. Of course she did. Judge Olivia Carter, a name that carried weight, a woman who didn't tolerate nonsense, and worst of all, the mother of the boy Karen had just harassed. Karen instinctively stepped back. Wait, Olivia's gaze was sharp. She looked at her son first, ignoring Karen completely. "Darius, what's going on here?" Darius shrugged. "Apparently, I don't belong here." Karen's face turned ghost white. "That's not what I meant." Olivia tilted her head. "Then tell me, Karen, what did you mean?" Karen's mouth opened and closed. A few neighbors exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "Oh, she's in trouble now." Security had arrived. 2 officers standing by the entrance, confused. One of them, recognizing Olivia, straightened immediately. "Judge Carter," one of the guards said with a nod. "Is everything all right?" Karen's jaw dropped. "Wait, you know her?" The guard frowned. Yeah? She's lived here for years." Karen's face burned with embarrassment. "I didn't know." Olivia turned to her, her voice even, deadly calm. "Didn't know what, Karen? That the black teenager you harassed for no reason was my son?" Karen stammered, looking around for help, but no one was coming to her defense. "I just thought what?" Olivia pressed. "That he wasn't allowed here? That he didn't belong?" Karen couldn't answer. She was trapped. The poolside was silent. People were whispering, recording, shaking their heads. Karen's voice cracked. "I made a mistake." Olivia's expression didn't change. "No, Karen, you didn't make a mistake. You made an assumption. And now you're dealing with the consequences." Karen looked away, her hands shaking. Darius stepped forward, his voice steady. "Next time, try minding your own business." Karen had nothing left to say, because for the first time in her life, she had no power. Karen's hands shook as she looked around. People were staring at her, their expressions a mix of disbelief and disappointment. The very same neighbors she expected to support her were now looking at her like she was the problem. She forced a nervous laugh. "I just didn't know. I assumed." Olivia cut her off. "Yes, you assumed." Her voice was firm but calm. "And that assumption led you to harass my son, call security on him, and try to have him removed from a place where he belongs." Karen's face burned with embarrassment. "It wasn't like that. You thought he wasn't supposed to be here," Olivia finished for her. "And why is that, Karen?" Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Darius folded his arms. "Yeah, Karen. Why is that?" Silence. The weight of the moment settled over the crowd. People whispered. Someone nearby muttered, "Wow, she really got caught." Karen's breathing became unsteady. "It was a misunderstanding." Olivia took a step closer. "No, Karen, it wasn't. A misunderstanding is forgetting someone's name. A misunderstanding is mistaking someone's car for yours in a parking lot. But calling security on a teenager just because you don't think he belongs, that's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." Karen's hands clenched into fists. "I didn't mean it like that. But that's how it is," Olivia said. "And it happens every day to people like my son." More people nodded in agreement. Karen's lips quivered. "I just thought he was out of place." Olivia's expression darkened. Out of place. She turned to the crowd. Do you all hear that? The murmurs grew louder. Wow. That's messed up. She really said that out loud? Karen's entire body tensed. The story was no longer just between her and Darius. It had become public. The same people who once greeted her at neighborhood events were now watching her unravel. She turned back to Olivia. Look, I just didn't recognize him. I didn't know who he was. And if you had, Olivia asked. Karen hesitated. If you had known my son belonged here, would you have still treated him this way? Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Darius exhaled sharply. I think we all know the answer to that. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. But there wasn't one. A neighbor spoke up. She's always like this, always watching certain kids like they're up to something. Karen spun around. That's not true. More voices joined in. I've seen it too. Yeah, she told my son he couldn't ride his bike in the neighborhood. She always acts like she owns the place. Karen's stomach dropped. This wasn't just one moment anymore. This was a pattern. Olivia's voice remained calm. Karen, this is what happens when people don't check their own biases. You thought you were doing the right thing, but you never asked questions. You just assumed. And today, you got caught. Karen took a shaky step back. Security finally spoke. Ma'am, you made a false report. That's serious. Karen's head snapped toward them. False report. I was concerned. But there was no actual threat, the guard replied. You targeted a resident of this community with zero reason. That's against the policies here. Karen's entire world felt like it was crumbling. Wait, so what does that mean? The guard exchanged glances with his partner. It means we'll have to file an official report with the Homeowners Association, Karen gasped. Her reputation, her standing in the community, was at risk. Please, there's no need for that, she pleaded. I've lived here for years. This is just a mistake, Darius scoffed. Funny how now you care about mistakes. The whispers continued. Some people shook their heads. Others simply watched Karen's entire life unravel. The reality of what was happening hit her all at once. She had gone from accuser to exposed. Her hands trembled. I never meant for it to go this far. Olivia's stare was unwavering. But it did. And that's the problem. Karen looked around desperately, but there was no one left to defend her, because today the truth won, and she had lost. Karen stood frozen, her face pale. The world around her had changed in an instant. Moments ago, she had been the one in control. She had spoken with authority, made demands, and expected to be obeyed. But now she was the one being judged. She turned to Olivia, desperation in her voice. Look, I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Olivia's gaze was steady, but it did. And that's the problem. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for support, for someone to step in and defend her. But no one did. The same people who had once greeted her with polite smiles at community events were now shaking their heads, whispering among themselves. She could hear bits and pieces. She really thought she could get away with this. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Unbelievable. Karen's stomach twisted. I was trying to keep the pool safe. Darius let out a dry laugh. Safe? Safe from what exactly? Karen stammered. I didn't know who you were. You thought I didn't belong. Darius cut in. His voice wasn't raised, but the sharpness in his tone made Karen flinch. Just say it. You saw a black teenager in the pool and decided I had to be trespassing. More murmurs. More eyes on Karen. She felt trapped. Olivia sighed, folding her arms. Karen, let me ask you something. If my son had been a white teenager sitting in this exact same spot, would you have done the same thing? Karen froze. The silence stretched on for too long, because everyone already knew the answer. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Darius nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Karen felt small. She'd spent years believing she was a good person, someone who only wanted what was best for the community. But now, standing under the weight of so many stares, she realized something terrifying. She had never questioned herself, never thought, for even a second, that she could be the problem. Her chest tightened. I'm sorry. Darius didn't say anything. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Karen turned back to Olivia. I mean it. I wasn't thinking. I made a mistake. Olivia's voice remained calm but firm. Karen, saying sorry doesn't erase what you did. Karen swallowed. I don't want this to turn into a bigger thing than it needs to be. Olivia tilted her head. Bigger thing? She let out a small, humorless laugh. Karen, this is a big thing. My son was humiliated, made to feel like a criminal in his own neighborhood. You called security on him for existing. Karen squeezed her hands together. I didn't know. But that's the issue, Olivia interrupted. You didn't know, and you didn't care to find out. You just assumed. And do you know how dangerous that assumption could have been? Karen blinked, confused. Dangerous? Olivia's eyes darkened. My son is lucky this ended the way it did. Because we both know how these situations usually play out. A call to security. Maybe security calls the police. Maybe my son gets accused of resisting. Maybe... Olivia's voice wavered slightly. Maybe this story ends in a way that can't be undone. Karen's breath caught. She hadn't thought about that. She'd thought she was just making a call. Just keeping things safe. But now she realized it could have gone so much worse. Her face burned. I swear I didn't think about it like that. And that's the problem, Olivia said quietly. You never had to. The pool area was silent. The weight of Olivia's words pressed down on Karen's chest like a brick. Darius sighed. I'm tired of this happening. Karen looked up at him, guilt swimming in her eyes. I really am sorry. Darius gave a small shrug. Okay. Karen blinked. Okay? He nodded. Yeah, I hear you. But sorry doesn't change what you did. Karen felt the sting of his words. But she knew he was right. The security guard cleared his throat. Judge Carter, do you want us to file a formal report? Karen's stomach dropped. A report. That could mean a complaint filed with the Homeowners Association. It could mean fines. It could mean consequences. Olivia studied Karen for a long moment. Then, finally, she exhaled. I don't think that's necessary. Karen's knees nearly buckled from relief. But, Olivia continued, her voice sharp, I expect that this never happens again. Karen nodded quickly. It won't. I swear. Olivia glanced at Darius. Are you okay with that? Darius thought for a moment. Then he nodded. Yeah. Karen felt a lump in her throat. She had never felt so ashamed in her life. Darius grabbed his towel and turned to leave. Olivia followed, but before she did, she stopped and looked back. Karen flinched. Yes? You should think long and hard about today, Olivia said, because next time, her voice was low, controlled. There won't be any warnings. Karen knew what that meant. She wouldn't get another chance. As Olivia and Darius walked away, the crowd slowly dispersed. People were still whispering, shaking their heads. Karen remained standing there, alone, feeling smaller than she ever had before. She had learned a lesson today, a hard one, and one she would never forget. Karen sat alone, staring at the water. The world had moved on, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying what had just happened. For years, she had seen herself as a good person. She believed she was fair, that she never judged people unfairly. But today, she had learned the truth about herself. She had made an assumption, a dangerous one, and it had nearly cost an innocent teenager his dignity, or worse. The shame sat heavy in her chest. Darius and Olivia were gone, but their words lingered. Next time, try minding your own business. This wasn't just about this one moment. It was about how easy it had been to make that mistake. And if it was that easy for her, how many other people were out there making the same mistake every day? Karen had a choice now. She could pretend this never happened, go back to her life, and act like it was just a misunderstanding. Or she could change. Now, let's talk about it. Have you ever seen someone get treated unfairly and done nothing? Or have you ever been the one who spoke up and made a difference? Drop your story in the comments. Let's have a real conversation. And if this made you think, hit like, share it, and subscribe, because these conversations need to happen. Today, it was Karen. Tomorrow, it could be someone else. Let's make sure we're paying attention.